right, Peace Nicks. Thanks for tuning in to the Peace on Drugs podcast. Some quick business. If you want to try a hemp cigarette that doesn't taste like shit, go to sugarcali.com. Enter the offer code PEACE15, PEACE 15 for 15% off. And orders over $25 get free shipping. This supports the podcast. Also, they really are good hemp cigarettes. A great alternative to tobacco if you're trying to quit, or if you're like me and you used to smoke and do occasionally miss that cigarette. This is something you can actually enjoy with a beer that doesn't lead back to a nasty habit. All right, today's guest, Jimi Fritz. I'm very excited about this guest. He wrote Confessions of an Ethical Drug Dealer, a psychedelic travelogue and memoir. Jimi Fritz is a heterodoxical polemicist, a skeptical polymath, an iconoclastic anti-theist, and an aficionado of stoicism. He is also a writer, filmmaker, musician, bon vivant, and former ethical drug dealer. You can get his book on Amazon, Confessions of an Ethical Drug Dealer, or go to Jimi Fritz, JIMIFRITZ, JimiFritz.ca. You can listen to his music, check out his films, and of course, definitely, I highly recommend his book, Confessions of an Ethical Drug Dealer. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I just started his earlier book, Rave Culture, an Insider's Overview. I just love the work that this guy's done, and he was such a great person to talk to. I know you're going to enjoy this, so let's dive in.
America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse.
Drugs are menacing our society.
Your thoughts on the drug problem?
I had a great time doing drugs.
So tonight, from our family to yours, from our home to yours, thank you for joining us.
This is the Peace on Drugs.
Yep.
Okay, good. We're all good.
Awesome. Thanks for doing this podcast.
Hey, no problem.
I read Confessions of an Ethical Drug Dealer, and I absolutely loved it, man. Great work.
Good stuff.
Yeah, it made me really jealous. I think when I was younger, I wish I would have traveled more because you were all over the place, and it seemed really.
Yeah,
really...
it's one regret that a lot of people have, and it's I'm happy not to have that regret because I've done all the traveling I really want to do. I don't have any great ambitions to do much more traveling. I mean, I'll go places for a specific event or purpose, but just to go places, to see places and wander around in cafes and stuff. I've done so much of that I'm good.
Gotcha.
Are you going to use the video as well, or just the audio?
Just the audio.
Okay, great. Good.
I actually my wife was asking, I turned 40 next year. So she's like, what do you want to do for your 40th? And I was going to do possibly Key West. We've been a bunch. And I was like, that's it. No Key West. We're going to Europe. We're going to do 2 weeks in Europe instead. So
nice. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's fascinating history. You'll enjoy it, I'm sure. Go to Amsterdam.
That's on our list. We were going to do
Paris.
Yeah, we're definitely doing Amsterdam. And I want to do Berlin. We're actually looking at. Now that I'm reading your first book, Rave Culture, and you mentioned this was the Love Parade in Berlin, and I looked it up, and that's in July, so we might do that.
Yeah, that's quite an event. I didn't even know it was still happening.
I just looked it up, and it's happening in 2022. It might have stopped for COVID or something. I'm not sure, but
yeah, they moved it to San Francisco at one point, and then they moved it back again. It got too big. It was like a couple of million people showed up.
Yeah.
It was huge, and they had some problems with crowd control and whatnot, so I think they dropped it for a while, but I'm glad it's back.
Yeah. Now, what are the drug laws in Germany? Are they very similar to ours or the United States?
I'm not sure, actually. I don't think they have legal. I think they might have some medical marijuana laws, but I don't think they have legal recreation or anything.
Gotcha. And nor decriminalized. Like it's a penalty.
It's probably pretty lenient, though.
Oh yeah.
Doesn't strike me as a very punitive society.
Gotcha. That's well. I do know that their arrest or their incarceration rate's much lower than ours. I mean, I think it's 93 per 100,000, and we're at like 350 in the United States, something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Yeah, the Confessions of an Ethical Drug Dealer. So this book was right up our alley for I mean, the whole purpose of my podcast is to end the drug war, or we're trying to cover the end of the drug war as it does come to an end. It's sort of getting there, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And it started with cannabis. Cannabis ended up being the gateway into making people realize they've been lied to, because now you have a lot of, I live in Florida, so a lot of elderly people here that were medical marijuana are now using it and realizing that it's a very beneficial drug. And
right.
So that's happened. And in Canada legalized it. And you said about that now it's exclusively big business owns it. So it actually ended up being a kind of a negative thing when they legalized it.
Kind of, yeah. They made a few mistakes, of course, but they're talking about licensing smaller growers. I mean, what made the pod industry so effective and profitable in BC? I mean, the whole economy was being run by underground pot growers for a long time. Boasted the best pot in the world, won the Cannabis Cup like 6 years in a row or something. BC Bud was the best around. And it was because of the expertise of the growers. So they were growing this fantastic pot, and then the government came in and legalized it, and then tried to grow their own pot. And of course, it wasn't as good. So there's still this, this underground collection of expert growers who are now been squeezed out of the market because they don't have, $2 or $3 million to start up these big operations that they're licensing. They're not licensing small boutique growers. They keep talking about it, but they haven't done it yet. Maybe they will at some point. But these things generally happen in increments, which is why you need, the medical marijuana laws before you get the recreational. We have the recreational in Canada now. It's legal on a recreational basis for anybody. So I think the same thing will happen with psychedelics eventually. Right now they're being legitimized through medical and therapeutic uses, but I've never used them therapeutically or medically or for therapy. I've always used them, recreationally and inspirationally, and to stimulate creativity and all those things, which I think is just as important. That's what's made my life worth living. So that's what I recommend, and I don't think there are enough people speaking out about that. So that was one of the reasons I wrote this book, was to present that part of the argument, was that they don't have to be medicine, or they don't have to be therapeutic. They can actually just be inspirational and fun and recreational, and they can incorporate them into your lives in many different ways.
Yeah, and that's what Bob Jesse said, the betterment of well people. Like, just because you're not necessarily broken by any psychological terms doesn't mean you can't be in a better place. It doesn't mean you can't be more connected with the human race and be more benevolent or empathetic. And I think that our society lacks a lot of that, but it's consumer based, so it's not seeing the whole picture sometimes. And if we can, it's like, yeah.
And people, it's a more legitimate use. People can get their head around the legitimate use of a medicine, for medical purposes, but they're still kind of resistant to people having a good time.
That's what Puritanism is.
It's just been a bit of a problem. I mean, that's been a problem with marijuana all along. But like I say, we are getting over it. I mean, it's amazing what's going on right now, the changes that are happening all over the world. More and more legalization, more and more decriminalization, and more legitimate uses. So I think we're going in the right direction now.
That we definitely are finally taking that, turning that corner where we're seeing the laws ease up for the first time in my lifetime. And this war has been going on since before I was born. Yeah, it's crazy that the world ever got this bad, where we actually, in some countries, in Asia, where people are being murdered for drug possession.
Right.
And, we had a president recently that, congratulated them for their handling of the drug problem in the Philippines. So.
Right. Of course, he was batshit crazy. So, you can't put too much story in that.
Which one? Both of them, Robert Duterte and the other guy.
Well, Trump is, I was thinking of specifically.
Yeah, no, I wasn't going to say his name.
He took crazy to a whole new level.
He did, and it's not gone away yet.
Nope.
Yeah, and I'm down here in Florida, so it's flags everywhere. Now the whole thing is fuck Biden, and that's the movement. And it's I've never seen such a just blatant disregard of lack of respect for the office. And that's what's happened now. Kids are coming up to me. Like, I play music for a living. I want to talk to you a little bit about music too, but I play cover music in the bars down here. But kids coming up, like young kids, like 8, 9 years old, with shirts that say "Let's go Brandon," which is code for "fuck Joe Biden." And I just want to be like, what is going on here? And this is supposed to be the right-wing conservative party, the party of morals, the party of a good Christian. That's who this party used to say they were, at least.
Yeah. The old Republicans are long gone now, I think.
Yep. But even my parents' generation, like my family's very conservative. I come from the Bible Belt, North Carolina, and they're very religious and conservative. But it was weird how they didn't like Trump when he was running. They didn't like him because he didn't fit what they thought was morally right. And then when he won, they fell in. So now they're like, yeah, they love him. They think he loves this country. It's weird just to watch that happen.
Yeah, it's certainly bizarre.
But you're up in Canada, so
yeah, we're all sane up here. We're all sane, well-adjusted, and using psychedelics recreationally.
Nice. Well, some of our states are starting to do a little bit of that. We have, Denver decriminalized psilocybin. I think Washington, D.C.,
yeah,
Portland, or no, the whole state of Oregon decriminalized. And it was funny hearing people's reactions to that. Down here, people are like, oh, they're rioting in the streets, but let's legalize all the drugs. It's like, first of all, they didn't legalize any drugs. Like, you don't even understand what's going on here.
Right.
But just the idea of stopping arresting people for their personal use. I mean, again, this goes to the conservatives. They're the freedom party, love freedom. It's like, well, what about my personal individual freedom? They don't love that.
Yeah, that's what I see it as. I see it as a basic human right, that you have the right to put anything you want in your body, be that, good or bad. I mean, people eat themselves to death and drink themselves to death, and we don't have a problem with that. But to, smoke a joint recreationally, and that's out of order. So it's a bit inconsistent and incoherent.
Yeah, I always try to figure out, is it because of the religious underbelly of our country? Because we kind of started the war on drugs across the world. And was it the Puritanism of our country? And as I had Maya Solovitz as a guest, and she said she thinks that it's not the religion, the Christian religion, is the consumer religion. It's the capitalist religion that doesn't fit psychedelics into its mainframe. And as you see psychedelics start to become legal, where are they trying to do it? What are they trying to do with them? Trying to microdose. Let's make people more productive and give them smaller amounts of this drug over an extended period of time.
Yeah. Well, I think there is a commercial aspect to legalization of drugs, because then they get the taxes. I mean, this is a $1 billion industry that they're not getting taxed. So there is a commercial advantage to legalizing and decriminalization. But I think it is an underlying, originally a religious, this religious idea, the puritanical idea that pleasure is bad, basically. And anything that gives you, puts you in an ecstatic state is suspicious, and that somehow having a really good time and exploring your own consciousness is somehow frivolous and somehow less important than, jobs and making money and other considerations. But I would argue that it's just as important. I think the most important aspect, the most important thing for psychological health is meaningful human interactions, and I get a lot of that with getting together with people and getting high, and that type of connection. It's a really meaningful connection, and you can get a much more deeper connection with people on psychedelics than you can normally, and that's really important for psychological health. Any psychologist would tell you that the most important thing is meaningful, authentic human connections, and psychedelics can really help with that. So that's the advantage.
Yeah, it does. And I do think it is, if you go back to the beginning of when the church originally opposed, actually it was the conquistadors, when they came over, the Spanish, they didn't want the natives using the herbal things they were doing, what was like mescaline and cannabis, because it was the sacrament. They were trying to spread Christianity, and it didn't work when you say you go to a church and you try to have that bond with, sober, and everybody's reading and singing the same songs, versus, like you said, that bond of psychedelics. If you go to a rave, or if you go to a festival and you're all taking psychedelics together and dancing, it's such a deeper, it almost more It goes into our ancient roots. Like you feel it.
Yeah.
So the church couldn't compete with that.
Well, one of the first studies that was ever done into psychedelics was the Good Friday experiment, where they took a bunch of clergymen, like Christian priests, and they gave them LSD. And 80-90% of them had what they considered to be, bona fide, real religious experiences. I mean, through the lens of their, Christian training or whatever. But they, even to this day, those people were interviewed like 40 years later, and they said it was still one of the most meaningful experiences they ever had.
Yeah, it's and it is powerful. That's the first thing that really changed my life. My first LSD experience, I was young, I was like 16, and I was raised in the church. I don't know if I it's not that I didn't believe it, I just didn't really care about it. I think I told myself I believed it. But the first real experience, like almost religious experience I had, was LSD, and I wasn't told it had any religious properties. It was just all of a sudden I felt the world open up to me, and I felt connected to it for the first time. And I never experienced that sitting in church. Church was just a boring place you went,
Yeah. Well, that used to happen a lot at raves, because I started to go into raves, and I was really impressed with that, which is why I wrote my first book, which is The Rave Culture and Insider's Overview by Jimi Fritz, available at fine bookstores everywhere. And I was so impressed with the movement and there was really very little. The only thing in the press was, a bunch of teenagers on drugs, and it was dangerous and people were dying. And that wasn't what was happening at all. People were actually, transforming their lives through meaningful social connection. And that's what I saw. And I saw people's lives change routinely on an ongoing basis, year after year. It was quite incredible.
It was really
People
fascinating. Go ahead.
That had never had that meaningful connection before, people that felt disconnected and disjointed in their lives. And finally, you could see it on their faces that for the first time in their life, they were experiencing, freedom, like personal freedom and empathetic connection with other people who were all on the same page. And it was a really, really powerful, life-changing experience for a lot of people.
Yeah, I remember when the rave thing first hit, and it was a lot of negative publicity. Like you said, it wasn't what was happening actually at the raves.
No.
But the news was talking about everybody's dying from different drugs. And if you look at what they were saying, they were talking about the contamination of the drugs that were killing them. And it was a small amount of people too. But either way, what you're saying is because there's not a safe supply, some people are going to die. And they're actually dying again now because fentanyl is making its way into the ecstasy supply.
Yeah. Which is a problem with prohibition, right? When you have people mixing up these things in basements, it can be dangerous, and a safe supply solves those problems.
Yeah, 1985, when the DEA banned ecstasy or MDMA, there was zero casualties. You could buy it with a credit card at some clubs, and there was no casualties. And then as soon as it was outlawed, what starts happening? Well, the black market takes over, and the supply gets contaminated, and people die.
Yeah, it's a direct consequence of prohibition.
Yeah, it's sad that we have the answer to a lot of these problems by ending prohibition, but we have a whole industry created around people's jobs, employment, lawyers, DAs, everybody's life, their livelihoods depend on this drug war to continue because it's the biggest amount of money that we inject into our legal system that doesn't need to be injected at all.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, so I did not get into raves when I was young, and I hate it because I only went to one actual rave when I was, I don't know, it was probably late 90s. And I remember I was never done ecstasy, and I was scared to, and I'd done LSD a lot. So I did LSD, and I had a great experience with it, but I missed out on the dancing and that part. I was more like into the lights and kind of in my own world versus connected with everybody there. It was still, I still had friends there and it was fun, but after reading your book, I was like, and it's not over. It's not like I missed out. So now I'm like, I got to go.
Yeah, that was unique to the rave scene. And, it was kind of a continuation of the Summer of Love and the hippie scene in the 60s, but it was on a different level. It wasn't, it was more empathetic. That's what was unique about it, is this group mind experience where everybody got connected and everybody felt empathy towards everybody else and towards themselves. And that was the unique aspect of it that really changed people's lives. And like you say, on LSD, if you don't get the dosage right, or you do a little bit too more, you become isolated more. It's better outside. It's better in nature. It's better with a few close friends. It's not really, you get overstimulated at a rave on acid. You can do a little bit and it's fine, but yeah, it's easy to do too much, and then you just want to, go outside and sit on the beach and talk to the seaweed.
Yeah. I wouldn't say I did too much. I could say I enjoyed myself. I enjoyed watching the people dance with the lights.
Yeah.
It was really cool. I just wasn't really a part of it. And that's what
Right.
and I've done ecstasy in other settings, and I've had great experiences with it, but not what I feel like I missed out on the whole rave experience. So I love electronic music. I'm really into like the Spanish spangle, like a world EDM kind of music.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to go to one of those concerts. And then also I was reading about if there's festivals in like Spain, and because Spain has these really good policies where they've decriminalized drugs. They've been decriminalized since I think 1972 or something. But
Portugal, I think you mean.
No, Portugal's 2000.
Oh, yeah.
Spain actually, that's one thing that doesn't get reported on a lot. Spain has been decriminalized since the 70s.
Really?
Yeah, and I mean, it's not legal to sell or anything, but it's been decriminalized, and they actually have testing. They test the drugs. It's government funded, and it's the best testing. So all these like dance safe groups, they'll send it to the Spanish testing. And so and therefore the street drugs are like 99% pure because everybody's getting them tested for free. So drug dealers can't sell, adulterated product. So,
right.
So my idea is to go to a rave in Spain at some point. I'd like to experience that, because at least you know what you're getting.
Yeah, there aren't too many really authentic raves anymore. There was a very specific formula that came up at the late 80s and early 90s, where there was a very, very specific kind of formula. And when I started going to parties, I reproduced that formula for my own events, and I started promoting raves for a number of years. I did one a month. And use that exact formula and kept it going. Now it's kind of fragmented into lots of different scenes. The music has gone off in lots of different directions, and the focus on that group mind trance experience has sort of been lost. There are still events around, but they're few and far between these days.
Gotcha. So I did miss out on the authentic rave, and it was really fascinating listening to you talk about how they would be secretive, but day of you could find out, here's the number, you got to call this day. And sometimes it was just to find out where to meet in person to find out where the rave was. Yeah,
there were meetup points. So you'd get a phone number, on the flyer, and you call the phone number on the day of, and they say, go to this place. And it'd be a parking lot somewhere in a city, and you drive there and get there, and then you'd get told where the location was, and you'd go from there. So it was this series of, and it got pretty elaborate at times. There were people on the roof with walkie-talkies, watching for the police, and there was all these procedures. It was quite exciting. It was a real adventure going to parties back then.
That sounds awesome.
Or end up running around in the woods, trying to find a party, and there'd be, signs on the side of the road with twigs and rocks. So you'd have to find these clues, and then you'd eventually get there. But when you got there, you felt like you'd really achieved something. You really arrived somewhere special because you'd gone through all this procedure to get there. So it was fun. It was good times. Yeah, it was really a fun time.
It's like half the party was finding the party, and that's part of the game. It makes it so much fun. Like it's not just like go to the bar, it's right there whenever you want to get there.
Right.
It's the whole thing. That's a beautiful thing. I really wish I could have been a part of something like that. I wonder though, if you say that the authentic raves kind of shifted and it's moved and it's not the same thing anymore. And if you look at the acid parties of the late 60s with or not the late 60s, but when the Grateful Dead were playing, the same kind of thing was happening with acid back then. So I'm wondering, what's the next thing going to be? What's the next thing that's going to pop up?
That's what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for the new music, the new drugs, the new scene. I'm good to go.
Hopefully
I know what it's going to be.
Hopefully it's not a virtual world. That's what I'm scared of. It's going to all just happen in there.
I have no interest in that either. Last thing I want to do is strap on a headset and go into a cartoon world.
I do have a VR. I do have the VR thing. I enjoy some of the games, but it's not a place that's authentic. Last time I did mushrooms, I put it on. I thought it might be cool, and it was the least. It was like immediately was the fakest thing I'd ever been in, and I was like, this isn't fun at all.
That's the problem. Like with with psychedelics, it magnifies and amplifies reality. So if there's something wrong with it or inauthentic about it, I mean, I can't even use my phone if I'm on acid. You look at the screen and it's just a bunch of buzzing pixels. It doesn't look like anything.
Exactly.
Same with watching a movie. It's like, what? It doesn't seem real. So it doesn't have much of an effect. So virtual reality, to me, I haven't seen any virtual reality that was anywhere close to reality or not anything more than a cartoon world.
Yeah, it's very cartoonish, and it'll keep getting better. But either way, it's inauthentic. I think it's a fun little workout I can do in my living room with these bow and arrow games, and it's a little bit of fun, but it's nothing authentic. And if that becomes the next fad, we can all be connected here, then I'm not going to be a part of it. I think we're losing the human
I think
connection.
what's going to happen is if you look at the the exponential rate of computer processing and capability, and you project that 50 years or 100 years in the future, it seems to me that it's inevitable at some point we'll get to the point where virtual reality will be indistinguishable from reality. Because it's just a question of complexity, right? You just have to get all the 3 dimensions worked out and the realistic imagery, and at some point you won't be able to tell the difference. I mean, that's inevitable given the progression that we've seen so far. At some point in the future, we'll have virtual reality which is indistinguishable from real reality. So that might be interesting.
Actually, it will. And what's going to be cool is it's not going to be like The Matrix. Remember the movie The Matrix? They plug it into the back of your head and everybody has a port. I think what's going to happen, if you like Ray Kurzweil talks about it in The Singularity, is it'll be more like an injectable nanobots that go in and actually go into your neurons, and you can go into your computer, upload video games into your own neurons, artificial neurons that you've injected. So it'll almost be like a drug in itself. You'll inject it,
exactly,
and then you'll upload into your neurons that you've added, and then that's when reality will there will be no difference in this reality or that reality, because it'll actually be happening in your head.
Right, but you still got the problem as you are in an alternative reality. So I mean, there is something to be said for walking through the woods,
100%.
walking through nature. I mean, if it's I guess if it's a simulation and you can't tell the difference, then is there a difference?
And that's an interesting question. I guess there is. I mean, it's like when you see someone do if you do, like if I smoke DMT and all of a sudden I'm in another world, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. But if you sit beside someone else doing it, when they go into the world, it's not like they're gone in that world. They're sitting there just staring at the floor. And that's what we'd see in the virtual world, right? So your body is still here. You're not getting healthy by sitting, going into the other world.
Ultimately, you're just sitting on the couch.
Exactly.
Sort of going on in your head. But, that's what happens when we dream too, right? We're just laying in bed, but there's all kinds of stuff going on. Sometimes it seems very real. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I'm kind of happy that it's a future that I probably won't see.
It is one. It makes you wonder, like you said, if you can go into your own head and see the most beautiful world ever imaginable, then what's going to make this world excited if you see an actual waterfall in nature, if you've seen something that's on an imaginary planet. And you already see that with kids. My buddy took his kid fishing, and there were some sharks. They were trying to catch this fish, and sharks were attacking it on the side of the boat. All this is happening, and the kid was bored. He didn't even want to be there. He wanted to be home playing his video games. I'm like, how do you see a shark by the boat attacking another shark and not immediately think that's the craziest thing you've ever seen? But it's just... And it's not, most kids would probably be excited about the shark, but the fact that there are kids already now that are just not concerned with the natural world, it's just bizarre to me. And that's going to keep getting more and more like that.
Yeah, at some point we'll get desensitized to the real world. And that's a kind of a frightening prospect, I think. I kind of enjoy the real world. I like the augmented world. I mean, psychedelics are great because they amplify the real world. They amplify reality. And so that's their value. Whereas, what you're talking about is kind of a completely artificial reality that doesn't exist. So that's the kind of a different ball game altogether.
It is.
I'm kind of partial to this world.
Yeah.
I kind of got used to it over the years, So
yeah, and you've seen so much of it.
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, I've had a wonderful life. So I guess for some people that don't have wonderful lives, though, and do regular jobs and boring jobs, then the idea of strapping on a headset or shooting up some nanobots and going off to paradise and is pretty attractive because it's escapist, right?
That's a very good point. A lot of people get stuck into just these circumstances that are just monotonous. Every day is the same thing. And I got lucky because I ended up getting arrested for drugs. I wasn't able to get into the corporate world and I just decided to take the path of just playing music, and it worked out. So
yeah.
But for a lot of people, I have friends that sell cars for a living that are just that every day that's what they're doing. And you try to say, hey, well, you want to go here or fly there, and then they have kids. They're like, nope, none of that. We're just gonna live this life. So I understand.
I grew up in a small town in England where it was a factory town. So there was a giant factory estate surrounded by council houses, row houses, and everybody, their whole lives, they went to the factories. And so everybody went to work every day and worked in these factories all day, and they came home and they ate and they went watched TV and went to sleep. And that was their entire lives from the age of 15 when they left school to when they died. And you got to question the value of a life like that, whether it's really worth it. So I decided at a very early age to leave that town and never go back and do something else. So in one way, it inspired me to seek alternatives, which turned out to be really advantageous. But some people just get stuck. So I guess some people don't have the imagination to get out and break out of the rut and look for other alternatives. And for those people, it's just it's a kind of a wasted life in some ways.
I agree. And honestly, I didn't have the imagination when I was young. I kind of got lucky, kind of falling into place with the music I had done. But when reading your story, you would just be on the road, sometimes flat broke in another country, and it would just work out. Somehow, some way you'd end up on a couch somewhere, and then you'd have money and you get this little job, and then you're traveling to this country, and then there'd be money, but then it would run out. But it never was a concern. You weren't like, well, I have to make sure I have enough for this, this, and this. It was just, no, we're just going to do this. We're going to live our lives and see what happens. And it just worked out.
Yeah, no, it did. And it was never a concern, even when I was in, sort of bad situations or whatever, or, tough situations, it was always, I just felt like it was all just an adventure. I didn't feel like the world was conspiring against me or anything. I felt like it was all just a natural progression, and I just carried on. And I got the impression that everything would always work out, and always had that attitude that everything would work. If I arrived in the city and I was on my own, I didn't have any money, I'd go hang out in the square and I'd meet some guy and I'd go back to his place, and then I'd be at a party, and then, one thing would just lead to another, and everything always worked out. And that's pretty much the way my whole life has worked out. It's just, and I think it has something to do with the attitude. If you have the attitude that things are going to happen, work out all right, then they're much more likely to. Whether you have the attitude that everything's difficult and insurmountable, then that's what you're going to get. So I think it has a lot to do with your mind space, your head space, where you're at, as to what you manifest in your life. And I've had a pretty charmed existence, all in all.
Yeah, I will say this. I think you got lucky a few times, though. For the most part, I'm 100% with you. I think you had just the attitude, and this, it was an adventure. But there was times when you could have got arrested for hash that might have just changed the whole course of your life. But
it could have done, yeah. But I don't know. I might have gone to prison for a few years, and I might have written a couple of good books.
That's true. If you keep the adventure going, it's a positive way of looking at it.
Yeah, if you use your time, it doesn't matter where you are. If you use your time wisely and stimulate yourself or whatever, then I think you can overcome a lot of adversity with that attitude.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at things. And I think that sometimes we get caught up in the victim mentality, and I'm not talking about the politics on that, like that gets a lot deeper things, but just people that if something bad happens, you use that as an excuse not to move past it. And right. I've had that happen in my life where I've looked at my past as something that was a burden until you realize it's not even there anymore. You're just reliving it for no reason. And as soon as you drop it, and then you have a story you're building on, you keep on moving forward.
Yeah, that too. Like dwelling on the past rather than looking to the future. Like I was always here and now and looking to the future. I never really reflected, on things going wrong in the past, because there didn't seem to be any point to that. I think people get mired in, in their past, even if they have trauma and stuff. People get obsessed with this. They get obsessed with their trauma from childhood, and sure, it has an effect, but I think you can let it go. I think part of the process of getting past those difficulties is just letting them go and just seeing them. They don't exist anymore. The past doesn't exist. It's just an idea in your mind. It's just hanging in your mind, causing you problems. Or just get rid of it. Just stop thinking about it. I think you can just let things go. You can let go of past trauma rather than reliving it and hashing it up and owning it and, having it be who you are. I think there's a value in just being able to let go.
100%.
That's the practice of meditation, is letting go of your thoughts. Your thoughts are not who you are. They just come and go. They're like clouds in the sky. You don't need to attach yourself to every nasty thing that ever happened to you. You can just say, okay, it wasn't my fault. It wasn't anything to do with me. It was just circumstances, and move on and just forget about it and get on with tomorrow. What do you want to do tomorrow?
Yeah,
That's
Eckhart
sort of been
Tolle.
my attitude, and it served me well, and I think it would serve a lot of people well.
Definitely. Yeah. It reminded me of Eckhart Tolle talks about it in A New Earth, about the birds watching ducks get in a fight in a pond. The ducks get in a fight, and as soon as the fight's over, you see them both vigorously flap their wings. That's to release all that negative energy, and then they just float serenely in the other direction like it never happened.
Right.
Like if you see a person do that, person gets in a fight, they're both going to relive that fight over and over. The fight's still happening in their head as they float away. There's nothing serene about the float away, and their body thinks the fight's still happening, so it's still producing adrenaline and everything else.
Yeah, because your body, you don't know the difference between reality and fantasy. If it'll react, you react to it the same way. So you got to let go of those ideas. It's just about letting go of ideas that don't serve you. And when the thing's over, it's over. It's almost like it didn't happen.
Yep. And
unless you hang on to it, which people have a tendency to do.
Yeah, we do. And I've spent a lot of my life that way when I was young, up into my mid-20s. And then I just realized, well, I was actually reading books like A New Earth actually helped me realize, just it's time to move on and forgive, not for the person or for whatever happened, but for myself, just to forgive the past. And now I've a very happy life. I don't have to, deal with those problems anymore. And a lot of the depression, like the pills they try to give me, the antidepressants, none of that helped. It was just realizing I didn't need that. I didn't need to hold on to my past at all. And now I have a good relationship with everybody from my past. Everything's back the way it should be.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's the way to go. And I think the antidepressants and stuff and therapy, I think it can be useful, as a bridge. But at some point you have to get over it. At some point you have to, live your life and be who you are. And so that should be the end result, not to be medicated for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things to bring this back to psychedelics. One of the problems the establishment might have with psychedelics is they don't want something that's going to be a cure. They want something that's going to be a treatment because it's a lot more profitable if they can keep somebody on a medication versus takes a 5 grams of psilocybin mushrooms, have a really good experience with a guide, and you're going to go through a lot of trauma in that one single night that might, you might never need a trip again, or you might do it every few months, but
right.
I mean,
that's right. And that's why the antidepressants and all those drugs caught on so much, because they're a daily thing that you do for life. Some people are on those things all their lives. And it's good for business, but it's not great for people necessarily.
Especially when the side effects I think are just as bad as what they're trying to treat half the time. I mean, it's crazy. Just even watching the advertisement for these drugs is like yesterday I saw advertisement for HIV medicine. And I'm just like, who has, if you have HIV, wouldn't the doctor tell you about the HIV medicine? Why would you need to go to your doctor and ask them for a drug for something like that? But that's the way capitalism is working within our system of medicine, and antidepressants are just marketed everywhere. And the slightest you go in there with a problem, they're like, well, try this. Well, how about try talking first? Because maybe it's talking through stuff can be much more powerful than a drug.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's a really big plus with psychedelic therapy, and we're seeing that now. Is they're getting people are getting more out of a couple of psychedelic sessions than they would have done out of years of conventional therapy and antidepressants. So we're certainly seeing the results, and that's why these things are being fast-tracked now. And the FDA fast-tracked MDMA as a treatment for PTSD, and it's expected to be a prescription medication within the next year. And that's been 25 years in the making. Rick Doblin of MAPS has been working on that literally for 25 years and finally sees the finish line. So I have a lot of respect for that type of tenacity.
Definitely. And yeah, what he's done is absolutely amazing. And yeah, just the so with the when they pass this MDMA, will that immediately have to be descheduled? I imagine it'll have to move to Schedule 2 because it'll then have a medical.
It'll be a prescription medication. So it'll be prescribed by a doctor specifically for PTSD at first, and then they'll probably find cross-platform uses for it after that. But the big hurdle is to actually have it available as a prescription medication. Right. So it'll have to be a legal source made by a reputable lab, and then they will supply the doctors and they will prescribe it. And that will be the beginning.
Right. But I'm just saying that right now it's a Schedule 1 substance.
Right.
So that would have to automatically, I would imagine, move it to a Schedule 2.
Exactly. Yeah.
Schedule
1 means that it has no therapeutic use and it's addictive. I mean, those are the two criteria for a Schedule 1 drug.
Which cannabis is in.
Obviously, that's not true for cannabis or MDMA now because it's been proven, over and over again. So that has to change, and that'll be a big milestone.
Yeah, hopefully it'll start pulling into other drugs like LSD. LSD got such a bad name and a bad rap from the 60s, just from all the propaganda they threw at it, that's why psilocybin's the first to move forward, because a lot of people don't even know what that is. But LSD is immediately, if a candidate came out for pro LSD, then the other, the opposing party, which would be the conservatives, would just bash them saying they wanted to legalize acid. But LSD is my favorite substance of the psychedelics that I've done. I mean, I love psilocybin, but LSDs, I feel like there's some really profound things we can learn about our own consciousess through that.
Yeah, maybe we just need to rebrand it,
That's it.
Happicillin or something.
That's what it needs.
Give it a better name, more positive branding. It's a branding issue, I think.
100%. That's what we need. We need a marketing makeover for acid, because I mean, I like the term acid makes sense to me because reality kind of melts in front of you and it's very liquid. But when other people hear acid, they think of your brain physically melting with the whole eggs in the frying pan thing, and like that's not
acid or something.
Yeah, battery acid, exactly.
Corrosive substance.
Yeah, no, it's like that's what it does to your ego. It's not what it does to your brain.
We're doing some interesting work in England right now with LSD and cluster headaches and migraines.
And that was what it was originally he thought he was doing, right? Albert Hoffman was working on migraines, if I'm not mistaken.
Was that the original purpose? I thought it was something else, but yeah, it was some other purpose. It was, accidentally sort of discovered, like many things are,
So what are they doing? What's the work they're doing there?
Well, just as a treatment for, they're trying to actually synthesize a form of LSD that doesn't have the hallucinatory qualities. So you don't actually get high, but there's something about LSD that seems to relieve cluster headaches and migraines. Some of these people are in terrible shape. They're huffing on oxygen and writhing around on the ground. I mean, they're really, really severe cases. And there's been some good results with LSD. So there'll be another prescription use at some point, I would think.
That's really fascinating. I'm wondering if what is in the LSD that causes the hallucinations or causes the experience. If you take that away, are you going to lose any other?
That's what they're trying to tease out. And they can use computer modeling for this now, which is really interesting because you can take a molecule and rather than keep synthesizing and resynthesizing and trying to figure out the different things, you can actually make predictions with computer models. And you can get these computer models to take a psychedelic compound and then redesign it, 10,000 times in about, 5 minutes.
Wow.
And then you got some more stuff to work with. So yeah, it's pretty exciting what's happening with computer modeling and psychedelics. Making new substances.
That's crazy. And then eventually that'll turn, I imagine, into the actual printing. You'll be able to print molecules. They've heard people talking about this.
Right. Yeah. It's like folding proteins or whatever. You can just do it in a computer model and then print them out.
I love that idea. Just print out some MDMA, prints it out, pop it up. All right, pure.
Yeah, you'll have a little appliance, like a toaster or a microwave or something. Only you just tap in what you want, it'll make it for you.
Wow, see, that part of the future I'm excited about, except for the fact that then if the drug war were to continue, that would mean the DEA is kicking in your door and seizing your computer and looking at your hard drive and seeing that you printed out something illegal. But hopefully by then we're past the drug war and we've understood a little bit more about individual freedoms.
Yeah, no, I really think we're getting there. I see a lot of positive progress on a lot of fronts. I mean, there's about a dozen universities in North America now that have departments of psychedelic medicine. That's a really positive step. So there's a lot of things happening right now. I mean, the second to last chapter of my book, I tried to summarize what was going on with psychedelic therapy around the world. And when I started to research it, it's like several books on its own, because there's so much going on. I couldn't even keep track of it all. So I just kind of hit the high points, and just to give the impression that there was a lot happening, and it's happening very quickly. So it's very positive things happening right now. And I think the drug war will become a thing of the past. It's gotta go the way of the dodo, because it's just obvious to everybody that it doesn't work on any level.
Exactly. I know that the bill just passed in our house yesterday for decriminalization of cannabis, or it was and a tax put on it. So I'm not exactly sure what it looks like for states that don't have, like states like Alabama that don't have any legal medicinal. Will they immediately have to legalize, or will the federal government leave it up to the states? So I'm not sure how that's
going. They'll still have like states law, right, where the states make up their own.
Yeah, it depends on different things. I know, for instance, like homosexual marriage was outlawed in certain states, or most states didn't have it, but the federal government stepped in and was like, this is no longer a thing you can discriminate against, and now every state has to have that. So if the federal government were to decriminalize cannabis, could states still arrest for it? But then I look at things like kratom, which is not federally illegal, and states like Alabama will arrest you for it. So
right.
So I'm not sure with cannabis how they're going to write the legislation.
It's always a big patchwork of laws in the states, isn't it? Because you have all the different states with different laws, and there'll be some confusion for a while. But eventually, I do think it will even itself out. These laws will become universal, and the substances will become universally accepted for various uses and prescription use, and eventually recreational use. So I think we're definitely heading in the right direction.
I agree. And we'll see the biggest things right now we have is the psychedelic research. And like I say, when I sent you the email, I was really excited to talk to you, because most of my podcasts recently have been about opioids, because that's the kind of the big thing in the news right now. And I've talked to a lot of people who want them to be completely legalized for the same reason that we're talking about with MDMA, is the adulterated product is ultimately what's killing people. But I would agree with you. You call them dumb and smart drugs. And I know what you're saying by that 100%, because I mean, there's drugs like LSD, which are going to open your awareness and open you up, and they're not physically addictive and even really habit forming from my experience. I mean, you're not going to have a trip like that every single day. But the drugs like cocaine, that you're just chasing something you're not getting anything from. It just keeps you trying to find something in it that nothing's there.
Right.
But I do think
some of the earliest research on with LSD was done in the late 50s in Saskatchewan in Canada by a guy called Humphrey Osmond and Abram Hoffer. These guys did a study with alcoholics, like chronic severe alcoholics, and they were curing alcoholism. They were curing addiction with LSD, and had these great results. And then of course it burst onto the scene and it became illegal and all that shut down. These are the guys that coined the term psychedelic.
Right, in Aldous Huxley.
Yeah, that's right. And that was, in the late 50s. So it was a long time ago. So it was promising at that time. And then of course it became, the drug war just wiped everything out.
Yeah. It's we lost, half a century of research that we could know that much more about our own consciousness, but we didn't have the tools.
Yeah, we got some catching up to do.
We do, and thank God it's finally happening with groups like MAP, pushing the envelope on that. Been a long time coming. And we'll see what happens as these states start decriminalizing and more opens up. How we fold it into our culture, because it's going to be interesting to see. I'm excited about it. I think, and it's interesting to me how much of our culture is psychedelic, like from the 60s, how much it influenced art. Even when you go to just like Target and you see wallpaper, it's like it's all influenced by psychedelic. It's everywhere.
Yeah. Music, culture, literature,
Mm-hmm.
art, all these things have been profoundly influenced by psychedelics. There was an edition of the MAPS newsletter that was put out one year. It's probably about 10 years ago now. But what they did is they went back to all these different scientists that were working in the 60s, and they talked to them about their major breakthroughs. And these were major breakthroughs, like Nobel laureates in chemistry, in computer science, in physics, and they were solving these hard problems and making these breakthroughs. Well, it turns out that a lot of them were using LSD.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these breakthroughs were made with the influence of LSD. And of course, they couldn't say anything about it at the time because it was illegal. But now they're all in their 80s or whatever, and they're retired. And they all made statements. Rick Doblin found all these people, and he got them to write these statements. So the whole newsletter was just full of about 25 different statements by these major leading scientists that had made important breakthroughs in their fields, and they all accredited it to LSD, solving these problems, from the DNA molecule with Wasson and Crick's and all the computer virtual reality language.
Yeah,
was written by a guy from an LSD trip. He said it all came to him in this LSD trip. It took him 2 years to write the code, but that was the birth of virtual reality. A lot of computer technology, a lot of the early Apple guys
mm-hmm.
were doing microdosing.
Even Bill Gates, who wasn't like, I think Steve Jobs was more into it, but Bill Gates also did LSD with him.
Yeah, no, it's quite amazing the influence that it's had on our culture, and that story hasn't really been told completely yet. So that will probably start coming out more and more too.
Yeah, I wonder if it is though. Are we bringing whatever the psychedelic? If psychedelics are communication, some kind of chemical communication. I mean, this is getting into the fringe territory, but a communication from some other world, some other reality that's trying to communicate with us, and we're opening it now. We're bringing it alive through technology that it told us about, and now it's coming into our visual worlds. Now we're carrying it around in our pockets everywhere. I mean, fascinating thought.
Yeah, you can run wild with that stuff though, and I think that's kind of. There was, Terence McKenna and his ayahuasca machine elves, and catapulting yourself at light speed into geometric universes and other planets and stuff like this. I don't think that stuff is useful because I don't think it's true.
Gotcha.
I think it does have an amazing effect on human psychology and our brains. It makes our brains work in a different way, and that can be really useful and inspiring and effective and valuable. But I don't think postulating supernatural explanations is very useful. And that's a real dichotomy right now in psychedelic research, because you've basically got these two camps. You've got the camp which is science-based, which says, let's find out what these molecules do, let's find out how they work, let's find out what they're good for, and use evidence-based science to do that. Then you've got this other group of people who are spinning off into other worlds and other planets and talking to aliens. So, and I understand where it comes from, because it does feel like sometimes you're in a completely different reality or you're in another world or something, but I don't think we are.
It's just an illusion.
It's the product of our own psychology, and I think that's an important distinction to make. So I'm in the science camp on that one.
I understand that, and I probably lean more that way, but it's just fun. The other thoughts are they're fun and imaginative, but I think that's where we get in the realm of mythology is fun. But what happens when you believe mythology can be catastrophic? We've seen that with world religions.
Yeah, you're back to religion again, right? And that's never done us any good as far as I can see.
Yeah, so and that realm, I agree with you. I just think it's playful and fun, but like you said, up to a point till it becomes dogmatic and people are all of a sudden willing to kill over mythology, and that happens all the time for some reason.
Yeah, it also gets in the way of the legitimate understanding of these substances, because you can do an ayahuasca session and it can be valuable, and it can be guided or whatnot. But when you get into talking about, animal spirits, I don't think it's useful. I think it's distracting from actually what's going on. Creating a supernatural or fantastical explanation for these things, I think it takes you further away from the truth.
I can see that, and within the like you said, for scientific research purposes, there really isn't a place for these more crazy ideas of what if it's another dimension, like I'm saying. But when you're in the moment of the psychedelic experience, like say you're at a rave and you're dancing with a group, and it's like you're a flock of, look at a flock of birds. How do they all know when to move at each time? They don't. They just do it. And when you're in dancing like that, and that happens with you in a group, or for me, it's happened in bands where you're playing and all of a sudden you're just flowing together. Yeah. That kind of thing. I think it's hard to put that in a lab and try to figure out exactly what's going on with each consciousness. And once you do that, you strip away a lot of its beauty. Sometimes it's nice to just believe in something a little more, a connectiveness that is deeper than just what you can write down with mathematics.
That's the argument. That's the argument for religion, that it's a consoling fantasy, but a fantasy nevertheless.
True, but when you get a group of people together, like say they're all singing gospel and they're all locked into it, because my aunt talks about it when she goes to church, how she feels, and when she describes it, I'm like, that reminds me of when I went to Bonnaroo and did mushrooms. But
exactly,
she's experiencing that. But the difference with Bonnaroo and mushrooms is I was left feeling peace, love, and happiness, and I didn't go and say, all right, now we have to figure out how to get other people to come. I'll tell people about it. It's great, but it's not like religion becomes like a this or hell. It's like no, it's like this or don't do it. Like you don't have to.
Yeah, but that's how wrong it can go, right?
Mm-hmm.
that sort of magical thinking, that's how it can go very wrong very quickly. So that's why I don't think it's very useful.
I agree, but I think that's the reason Christianity became the biggest religion that it is because it was the first to be so clear about there's one God and there's heaven and then there's hell. And then hell was so awful that they were able to sell this to so many people of, well, you don't want this, versus the more polygamous religions that are not polygamous, but polytheist that have multiple gods and multiple things. That's more playful and more fun. You believe in it or you don't. But when you have Christianity, it's
just as equally untrue.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. Well, it's just like believing in Zeus and Poseidon and all those, the Greek mythology,
thing, right?
Yeah. So you actually said that in your book. I thought it was interesting. You said that. Go ahead.
You go.
I was saying, you said Rome had a choice that, they could choose Greek philosophy or Christianity, and we've been paying for that ever since.
Right. Yeah. Think how much further ahead we'd been if we'd gone with logic and reason instead of, fantastical supernatural explanations.
It's interesting. I do think that we have, a lot of people did go with logic. They just allowed Christianity to be, for the masses. Y'all can have that, but the institutions kept working towards logic and reason. And the problem is they've had to fight Christianity throughout the whole time, which has held them back.
Yeah, but we're under the logic and reason, and science is under serious attack right now.
Yeah,
from the irrational elements in society, because the truth seems to be no longer important. People want to create their own private versions of the truth, and we don't seem to be able to agree on facts. When you can't agree on facts, you have no basis of civil discourse. Civil discourse breaks down at that point, and that's what we're seeing. That's what you're seeing in a lot of places now. It's just people in these intractable, irrational positions that can never change their mind. So we can't make any progress.
I 100% agree with you, and I have seen it with like a lot of people I know I'm from North Carolina, like I said, and the religion there, and it's the religious. I think that those that are equipped mentally to be religious, to buy all that nonsense. Sorry to call it that if you're listening, you're religious, but I mean, come on. And their minds were equipped when the Trump movement happened. They already had the neural networks ready to buy the bullshit that they wanted to buy. So their brains just uploaded it right up into that system, and was like, now whatever reality they see, they don't have to see if it doesn't go right in line with what they're saying. So things that like George Orwell wrote about in 1984 when he talked about doublethink, people holding two contradictory ideas. I thought it was far-fetched, but obviously, unlike George Orwell, I didn't live through the authoritarian times. But now I understand it. Now it's not far-fetched. I completely saw it happen in real life.
Yeah, you see it every day on the internet now.
Mm-hmm. it's bizarre. It's extremely and scary also.
Well, it's a fact that and that's the problem, that's the slippery slope of irrational thinking. Like at first it might seem fun and more interesting, and you make friends in that circle, but it's a fact that if you believe one conspiracy theory, you're very likely to believe many conspiracy theories, and then more and more, and that becomes your reality. But it's not based in truth or fact, so we become disconnected from reality in that way, and I think that's a big problem. I think it's the biggest problem we face right now.
Well, especially when you have, there's a certain percentage of people I know who don't believe the world's round. So once you get that far, it's like, okay, well then if we can't agree on that.
Right. Then it's game over, right? Like where do you start from that? If somebody believes the earth is flat, okay, you can believe what you want, but it's a slippery slope, and that type of thinking is seeping into every single aspect of human culture right now, especially politics. Seems to be an insoluble problem at this point.
It does. And I wonder, like when the internet first started, everybody started having in their phones, and information was so freely being spread. I thought this was the most amazing thing ever. I was like, information's free, the whole world's going to go better. But now the problem is people don't know what's real and what's not, because of there's so much flow of information, that there's all different versions of reality are coming through your phone. So people get to pick their own realities and find articles and whatever they want to back up whatever reality they want to believe in. So
yeah, you just spin through your phone and read the headlines and believe everything you see. That's the problem with social media, though, I think, more than the internet.
Mm-hmm.
I think the internet is absolutely fantastic. It's a repository of all human knowledge at your fingertips, but you have to be really careful with your sources. If you go to the NASA site, you'll get good information about cosmology. If you go to medical sites, you get the best information available about medical issues. If you spend all your time on Facebook and Twitter, you'll get the opinions of every nut job in the world.
Yeah.
So that's a problem, and these algorithms are fine-tuned for conflict and division. So there's another problem. I don't understand why they can't write these algorithms to accentuate empathy and compassion, for instance. Like, why wouldn't that be a thing that they could do?
It's probably not quite as profitable, but all they need is some basic regulation from the government to just change that to where it becomes, if their competitors can't do it either, then there will be no incentive to do it.
Yeah. No, there has to be laws. There has to be top-down laws to make these things happen. Otherwise, people are not going to do it on their own. They don't have the equipment. They don't have the awareness. They don't have the intelligence to do it. So you have to make laws. And I think social media does need to be regulated to some degree.
I agree.
You get into all the thorny issues of free speech.
Yeah, well, we're already into those issues. So
yeah, very much so.
So we got to figure that out. And it's important. Like Scott Galloway brought up, Scott Galloway, he brought up this point, it was like the basic point of, if you have a business that can dump its pollutants into the river, it can make a lot more profit. So if the other company is competing with is already dumping this stuff in the river, then in order to stay competitive, they have to. So both businesses need the government to make that rule, to make that something you can't do, so that they can compete without dumping their stuff into the river. And that's why we need laws against Facebook, all the companies will be able to benefit from building a better world if they are things they just can't do, making these algorithms that are purposely going to suck someone down a rabbit hole of misinformation to the point where they're going to be alt-right extremists.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing the beginning of that now. There is there's a little bit more self-regulation on social media, and there's more pressure for governments to look at these things more critically and make appropriate laws so that you can protect people from the madness.
Yeah, well, I was just realizing we just kind of went off on a different tangent from the drug war, but it was really interesting either way. I love talking with you about it. I did want to talk to you more about your book, but it was just so fascinating. Confessions of an Ethical Drug Dealer. I just want the people that listen to my podcast know where they can buy it. And just a real quick, you were basically a drug dealer, and as far as that ethical drug dealer, because drug dealer has such a negative connotation to people, to a lot of people, and it's like you were selling cannabis and MDMA, and that's the thing. If you're selling something like MDMA, it's a great drug, and if you're selling it in its pure form, then I mean, this is you're doing a service, because people need to have a place they can get good stuff. But anyway, you're out of the business now. But yeah, talk about it for just a minute.
Well, that was my impetus to start selling, because I was consuming these drugs, and so was everybody I knew. And so I wanted a safe and reliable supply. So I took the time and trouble to make very good contacts and get the purest, highest quality psychedelics I could find, and then disseminate those to my friends, basically, and people that I knew. I mean, I was never selling drugs on the street corner or anything. It was basically the people that I knew and liked and loved, and I wanted them to have the best sources, and I needed that source for myself as well. So that was my impetus. That was the ethical part. And I only ever dealt psychedelics. I never dealt, crack or crystal or meth or any of that. So I was never interested in those drugs. And so, yeah, that was the ethical part. So it was a Confessions of an Ethical Drug Dealer. Was a purposefully provocative title to make that point, that there is ethical drug use and there is, ethical drug commerce. And that needs to be recognized, because we have such a bad, I think I just lost you. There you go.
I hear you.
And there's such a bad reputation that, and that was part of the impetus of writing the book too, was to present, a more realistic view of safe, responsible, ethical drug use.
Yeah, that's what I say. It's also ethical drug consumption. People that just because you're using drugs, there's this idea that if you're using drugs, then there's something's going on in your life we have to fix. No, some people love doing drugs for recreational purposes, and they're successful, motivated people, loving, caring people that you would love to be around, that would bring nothing but positive energy into your life, and they use drugs.
Yeah. And that's been my experience. That's been my 50-year experience, is that almost everybody I know has experimented with psychedelics, and I've been using them regularly for 50 years and never had a problem. So that's, to me, that was the reality of drug use, not what you see on the news about people dropping dead all over the place. That's a whole different problem. That's a mental health crisis. Mm-hmm. It's not really a drug crisis. It's a mental health problem. People are self-medicating because they've got serious problems. And then there's this problem with safe supply, and so people are getting poisoned as well. So that's that whole issue. I mean, that's never been part of my reality or part of my world at all. So that was this book was to sort of present, here's my life and here's my experience. Mm-hmm. And this is a more realistic way of looking at these things.
I love it. And I really, really did enjoy the book. I mean, it was a page turner. I'm telling you, I just couldn't put it down. It was awesome, man.
Yeah, a lot of people said that.
Yeah, I really did.
I had people that never read books, and they read it all through, like for 14 hours straight. Nice. And they said they hadn't read a book in 20 years. So that was a good compliment. It was good to hear. Yeah, that's great. And I really enjoy it. And I'm like I say, anybody listening, I really recommend you get this. Now, I bought it on Amazon, if I remember. Do you recommend, is there a place that better place to get it, or is Amazon as good as any? As good as any. It's on all the online platforms, and it's available on print on demand or ebook. And you just type in Confessions of an Ethical Drug Dealer by Jimi Fritz, and you'll find it all over the place. I also have a website called jimifritz.ca. So if you go there, I'm also a musician. I got 5 albums there. I've got a couple of dozen music videos of my original songs. I've got some screenplays, some films that I made. I was a filmmaker for 10 years, and lots of music, and my books and everything is on jimifritz.ca. Awesome. Well, Jimmy, it was so good talking with you. Thank you for doing this podcast. Thanks, Aaron. Nice talking to you too, man. All right, you have a good one. Cheers. Take care. Peace out. Cheers. Peace out. All right, peace, Nicks. As always, if you enjoy what we're doing, go to Apple Podcasts, give us a 5-star rating. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Peace on Drugs Podcast. If you want to subscribe to our newsletter, go to www.thepeaceondrugs.com/subscribe. All right, we're going to hand it over to Twiggy Branches. Peace out. You pay for what you get when you align yourself with the 4 p.m. jet set. Bad head, bad high, boots hard, vodka
what you get. You pay for what you get. You pay for what you get. When you align yourself with the Scorpion jet set. Bad head, bad high, who's hard, by kept in mind. So there, set it in a breeze, and by the grace of God, I see the sunrise. I see the sunrise. Are you my doctor? Are you my dealer? Are you my doctor? Are you my dealer? Are you my doctor? Are you my dealer? Are you my doctor? Are you my doctor? What you get, you pay for what you get, you pay for what you get, you pay for what you get. Are you my doctor? Are you my dealer? Are you my doctor? Are you my dealer? Are you my doctor? Are you my dealer?